Guess I could just go back to the Dairy Queen, you know.
In a sea of fast food restaurants that focus on bringing you hot food, mostly hamburgers, Dairy Queen has stood as the cold option that also happens to sell hamburgers. Despite their near omnipresence, there's not a ton that is known about Dairy Queen, at least when compared to other fast food restaurants like McDonald's that have had movies made about them. So let's delve into the world of ice cream headaches and break down the top 10 things you might not know about Dairy Queen.
Lieutenant Dan, ice cream.
The most Dairy Queen locations per capita happen to be in Minnesota. If there's one state that you'd think wouldn't need that many Dairy Queens, it'd have to be Minnesota, the state with the coldest temperatures for a major city in Minneapolis, especially as ice cream and ice hockey don't really go hand in hand. However, it's Minnesota that has the most Dairy Queen restaurants per person, and that may be due to the fact that Dairy Queen's international headquarters are located there, or because Scandinavians love their ice cream. Either way, if you're going to visit Minnesota and are looking forward to getting your favorite kind of blizzard or dilly bar, keep in mind that because of the frigid temperatures, their Dairy Queens are only open during the late spring to summer months. So, even with the ever-increasing amount of warm products that Dairy Queen has added to its menu in recent years, you're really only able to get any Dairy Queen product in Minneapolis from late May to early October, which means for the rest of the year, people in the northernmost state must be forced to eat their Reese's peanut butter cups and Heath bars without ice cream. Oh, the horror.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
Before we continue with more DQ scoops, hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell. Texas has the most Dairy Queen locations total. While Minnesota may not seem like the top per capita place for a Dairy Queen, what might not be a huge surprise is that Texas is the state that has the most restaurants total. With over 600 locations, Texas tops the list as the state with the most Dairy Queens, and that makes a lot of sense, as Texas is where red-hot heat and palpable humidity meet. And unlike other large states like California, the people there are all worked up about eating healthy and living into their 60s.
Ron, would you like some salad?
Since I am not a rabbit, no, I do not.
That's not to say that California doesn't have a lot of Dairy Queens as well. It's just that the Lone Star State is number one.
If you ain't first, you're last.
Which makes even more sense when you think about all the barbecue and spice that they eat, because nothing goes better with barbecue than a soft serve cone or drink like a Mr. Misty, as long as it's not the healthier option like the failed Breeze. Speaking of which, Dairy Queen's healthier options failed.
Make a healthy, low-fat or non-fat blizzard.
In 2018, most fast food restaurants have introduced healthier options, mostly out of necessity, as people became increasingly aware of just how bad the food in fast food was for them. While you'd think that an ice cream restaurant wouldn't have to worry about such things, as people aren't eating ice cream for every meal, or really more than once or twice a week, the people at Dairy Queen decided to ride the health craze that enveloped the early aughts and introduced their first low-calorie dessert option. Dubbed the Breeze, it was actually ahead of its time, as it launched in 1990, which is probably why it didn't succeed, or at least one of the reasons it didn't. The Breeze was a low-calorie version of the iconic Blizzard, made with frozen yogurt instead of ice cream.
His ice cream tastes like crap, by the way.
Yeah, well, that's that low-cal, non-dairy soy milk junk.
And while it actually lasted for a full decade before the frozen brains at DQ International pulled the plug on it, it is looked back upon as an abject failure. People go to ice cream restaurants to eat, you guessed it, ice cream. And so it might not surprise you to hear that so few people were ordering the Breeze, that Dairy Queen locations often had to throw away the yogurt before they could sell it because it was past its expiration date. That's surprising though, as frozen yogurt can taste a lot like ice cream, but it's probably just the mental aspect of eating yogurt instead of ice cream. But then again, if you're mixing candy into frozen yogurt, it probably defeats the purpose of it being healthy to begin with, which is probably another reason why this didn't work. And when you have more than one fatal flaw to your product, then it's safe to say that someone was fired over the disaster that was the Breeze.
You're fired.
The Blizzard was only introduced in 1985.
The one and only Dairy Queen Blizzard.
If you were to poll 100 people on the street and ask them what the most iconic item on Dairy Queen's menu is, it's safe to assume that the vast majority of them would choose the Blizzard. Made of soft serve and crushed up name brand candy like Reese's Pieces, Heath, M&M's, or Butterfinger, it's probably the most delicious thing on any fast food menu anywhere.
Yum.
So it may surprise you to hear that the Blizzard has only been on Dairy Queen's menus since 1985, nearly a half-century after the first store was opened in 1940 in Joliet, Illinois. The Blizzard was an immediate hit, with nearly 200 million being sold in the first year alone. Considering how iconic and intertwined the Blizzard is with Dairy Queen's image, it's hard to imagine it took them that long to think up something so vital.
It's been 84 years.
I mean, what did they sell before? Dilly bars? Ice cream without candy in it? Talk about a depression. Dairy Queen also owns Orange Julius. Both are owned by Warren Buffett.
Excuse me, is there an Orange Julius stand on this floor?
I'll sell you this one, it's almost full.
If you've been to one of the remaining malls in the world, you'll probably have come across a Dairy Queen or Orange Julius. And while you may have thought that the two have teamed up to pay the ridiculous rent that malls at least used to be able to charge, it actually turns out that Dairy Queen owns Orange Julius. Which, if you're a millennial, is like the grandfather to Jamba Juice. Surprisingly, Orange Julius actually predates the company that ended up purchasing it in 1987, with the first Orange Julius growing out of an orange stand in Los Angeles, California in 1926. The owner of the Orange Julius was named Julius in the shocker of the century, and he came up with his famous concoction alongside his realtor, a juice that was easier on the stomach by making the orange less acidic. People soon were shouting, "Give me an orange, Julius," and the name was born, only to be purchased by Dairy Queen in 1987 to combine their efforts and also offer something a bit healthier than a Blizzard and a bit more delicious than the Breeze. Now both are actually a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway, which is the company owned by famed billionaire Warren Buffett, probably because he just likes ice cream and consistent quarter-to-quarter profits. Why Dairy Queen turns the Blizzard upside down.
But why?
Outside of how delicious the Blizzard is, the other thing that probably comes to mind when you think of it is the fact that the employees turn it upside down before serving it to you. While there have been a lot of theories as to why they do that, with some people thinking that they're hoping to make the candy settle,
All right, settle down.
if that makes any sense, the reality is that it's a branding tool. You see, Dairy Queen really wants to hammer home how great their product is, and by turning the Blizzard upside down, they're showing you how thick and delicious the ice cream that comprises it is. And it's something that they actually borrowed from the frozen custard industry, namely a restaurant in St. Louis named Ted Drew's, which serves its frozen custard with mix-ins called concretes. So while it's about salesmanship and thus selling you something you already purchased, some locations take this very seriously.
Why so serious?
And have run promotions where if an employee forgets to turn your Blizzard upside down, you get to eat it for free. So the next time you're waiting for your delicious Blizzard, keep an eye on the employee making it. And while you might not get it for free, you'll at least know whether or not your product is up to snuff. As if it falls on the floor, it means the machine is broken. Or that you're probably dreaming. Talk about a nightmare. The Dairy Queen recipe for their soft serve is top secret.
It's a secret.
Shut up.
While some things in business are guarded for no reason, like the next entry in this video, there are other things that are obviously extremely important and thus are guarded with extreme care. By those who know the exact recipe or code. While the most famous example of this is the secret to Coca-Cola, which is said to only be known by a handful of people at any given time, to the secret herbs and spices behind Kentucky Fried Chicken, it turns out that Dairy Queen also protects the recipe for its soft serve, as if it were the recipe for the atom bomb in the 1940s. Perhaps not coincidentally, the first Dairy Queen opened in 1940, and was founded by the same man who perfected the scientific process for creating soft serve. And while they made sure to expand as quickly as possible to lessen the chances that another restaurant would steal their idea or do it better, it turns out that they also covered their bases by only letting a few people know the recipe behind the soft serve. According to what Chief Branding Officer Michael Keller told ABC News, the formula is kept
in a safe deposit box,
and there are only a few keys to it. The Dairy Queen Swirl is trademarked. Outside of deliciousness and blizzards, the main thing that people may think of when they think of Dairy Queen is that iconic swirl that comes atop a lot of their frozen treats. It turns out, like many things in business, that swirl is actually a trademark of Dairy Queen International. How do they trademark a swirl, you ask? Well, it's really how the swirl is discussed and shown in the media. Referred to internally as a Q, thanks to its similarities to the letter, there's a reason why Dairy Queen is the only ice cream location that focuses on the swirl, and that's because they have the trademark to market it that way. way. It also doesn't hurt that they really don't have a ton of competition in terms of soft serve, or the Q. But that's not a coincidence, and while you may laugh at the fact that they've trademarked something so silly, it clearly is working for them. So while you may not refer to it as a Q, it's about as iconic to Dairy Queen as the golden arches are to McDonald's. And at least the Q has something to do with the food you're getting, whereas the golden arches are just random, which the movie The Founder, about the founding of McDonald's, doesn't shy away from.
McDonald's can be the new American church.
Dairy Queen is from Illinois.
But it all started right here in Joliet, Illinois.
Some people have to slave for years for their dream to become a reality. But the fellas behind Dairy Queen and its first-of-a-kind soft-serve ice cream knew within the first hour or two that they had a hit on their hands. However, it took 2 years for them to get everything set up for their first location, which was located on 501 North Chicago Street in Joliet, Illinois. And while that location no longer hosts a Dairy Queen, the original building is still there. If that location hadn't succeeded, then we wouldn't have the nearly 6,500 locations around the world, and a decent amount of people probably wouldn't have diabetes.
I'm Wilfred Brimley, and I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about diabetes.
As we've learned elsewhere in this video, Dairy Queen was one of the pioneers of the franchising system of restaurant ownership, and they started franchising the same year that they launched, 1940, which goes to show you that they knew they had a good thing.
I know, right?
And that they needed to get it in front of as many people as possible before someone else stole their soft-serve idea and established a foothold in the ice cream restaurant industry. We're looking at you, Baskin-Robbins. Dairy Queen basically invented soft-serve ice cream.
Yeah.
These days, you can get soft-serve ice cream at basically every fast food joint. But back before World War II, the only ice cream that you could get anywhere was the semi-hard kind that makes up most ice cream cones or store-bought ice cream. As it turns out, John Fremont McCullough, one of the founders of Dairy Queen, helped pioneer the science behind soft-serve ice cream with his son Bradley back in 1938, 2 years before the first Dairy Queen opened. After perfecting their recipe and system, they partnered with a friend of theirs who just so happened to own an ice cream shop, Sherb Noble, and together they started selling what is now called soft serve on August 4th, 1938, a day that will live forever in the hearts of those who love ice cream headaches. It was an immediate hit, as they sold over 1,600 servings in the first 2 hours of their business alone. Talk about word of mouth. They clearly knew they had a hit on their hands, and in 2 years opened their first location in Joliet, Illinois. Don't go hunting down your local DQ just yet. Hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell. And while you're here, check out some of our other great videos.